Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to hashtag Got Money. So there's been a lot happening in my work world recently, and I thought, I haven't spoken to Melanie Heffernan for ages. I better get her in. So I welcome Melanie Heffernan from Southeast Lawyers. Did you like I got your last name right? It's only taken me 4 years.
Yes, it has. Have you done your will yet?
Yes, we'll have that
No.
discussion. We will have that discussion. We will. Melanie, welcome to hashtag Got Money. Lots
Thank you.
happening. So we really wanted to touch on commercial rents. What's happening in the commercial rent space? Because look, I think the general consensus is we're going to see a lot of owners of commercial property in a great deal of stress. Is there any relief out there for them currently in this climate?
There is a little relief for landlords. They have got the raw end of the stick, unfortunately, in this, but everybody has to pay the piper. So we're in Victoria and we have our own set of legislation on this. Other states have varying provisions. So what we're about to say only applies to Victoria. So if you're a landlord in Victoria and you've got a tenant who is receiving JobKeeper, then you do have an obligation to provide rent relief to that tenant. And you, in turn, yourself can get some relief on land tax, but it's not a full waiver of land tax, and you will have to pay it. I believe it's the 31st of March next year. So they're giving you an extra 3 months to pay your land tax at a reduced rate. For landlords, there's not much else, to be honest. That's pretty much it.
I think considering, like, we've had the harshest lockdowns out of all the states, it just doesn't feel long enough, does it? Because, I mean, our unemployment was at 14%, while the rest of Australia was nodding away at about 7.5, I think, from my last time I checked. I mean, is this enough? Or is it just a bit weak?
It's a bit weak on the landlord side, but the purpose of this legislation is to keep businesses in properties, retail, professional services, etc., and also the hospitality industry. And to be able to do that in the middle of a lockdown, obviously they can't afford to pay their normal rent because they don't have any income coming in. And some of these businesses operate on quite slim margins. So it's not like they have cash sitting around to pay the rent on a property that they can't receive any income from. So the government has really focused on that, made assumptions that landlords will be getting some sort of relief if they have a mortgage in place from their banks, and proceeded on that basis. And
so this was all a response to the banks underwriting or allowing the owners mortgage holidays, essentially.
Partly, and the other part is due to the federal government setting down a code for rental relief for small business that is tied into JobKeeper, and therefore there was pressure on all the states to sign up on that participation agreement and to implement legislation on that basis.
Are you back in your office yet? I notice you've got a really nice kind of office behind you, but I kind of feel like there might be something a bit like something I prepared earlier.
Yes, this is my office, but no, we are not back in the office yet. We can work from home, so we must work from home at the moment, which is disappointing that there weren't any changes to that on Sunday, but it could be worse. We can do some of our work from home.
How are you managing the mental health of your staff under these conditions?
It's very difficult. Some of my staff have been home since March. I've got one staff member who has been home since February. So they're into the 100 plus days of being at home, isolated. It's better now that we can go places, we can do things, we can visit in person. But I think my staff, along with staff of most small businesses, have had an incredible amount of pressure on them. And mental health is certainly a big issue. So we've been providing resources to staff and really just checking in with everybody as much as possible to see if there's anything else that we can do and just to have a bit of human conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I interviewed a business owner down here in Bentmay East the other day, and I thought, we've got monies concentrated primarily on the national landscape, but really within our own backyards, there have been small businesses really taking the brunt of it. And it's interesting to see because you've been a part of my show for a long time now, and yeah, there is a real human cost to what we've been in. Within your law practice, what spikes have you seen during COVID?
We have seen spikes in retail leasing with clients who want to be sure of their rights, particularly with the changes that have taken place in retail leasing law for JobKeeper 2. So the changes to retail leasing law for JobKeeper 1 have been strengthened with the implementation of JobKeeper 2. So tenants want to be sure what they're entitled to so that they can pursue that with their landlords. And we've also seen a spike, of course, of landlords obtaining advice as to what their obligations are in respect of retail leasing. We have seen a spike in debt collection, of course, people wanting to get money into their business, chasing long-term creditors. Sorry, not creditors, debtors. And the flow on from that is a lot of terms and conditions being revamped to give power to businesses to caveat properties, to lodge security interests over businesses, like a fixed and floating charge type arrangement to ensure that at least long term they can have the best chance of recovering these funds. And of course, we've seen a spike in people asking questions about insolvency.
It's a shame, isn't it? Because a lot of businesses will go to the wall as a response to what we've been in. Yeah, I spoke to who's the lady? Who's your family lawyer? Because we were talking about divorce and COVID. Are you still seeing Courtney? Are you still seeing large groups of individuals trying to get out of their marriages or partnerships still? Is it still continuing?
Yes, we're certainly fielding a lot of inquiries about what you might get if you split from your partner in terms of financial. More inquiries about, particularly in relation to people who already have children's orders, about how to implement those in COVID. Parents are under a lot of stress, particularly where you've got the breakdown of a relationship and you have child access agreements. A lot of people aren't pulling the pin on it just yet because they don't have anywhere to go.
That's the problem, isn't it? It's okay to get out of a relationship, but where do you go? And exactly. I guess that's it's compounded through financial anomalies as well, like people just staying together so they can afford to pay their rent or their mortgages.
Yes, exactly. And now is not the time that they want to be incurring the sorts of costs of moving houses, paying bonds, those sorts of things. So we're seeing separations under the same roof, but we are seeing people put it on the back burner to pull the trigger on at some point in the future. And I think what we will see in sort of 6 to 12 months is that we will have a spike of people who said, it was COVID. COVID was the last
The last straw.
I didn't enjoy spending day after day with my partner.
I was talking to my partner about that the other week. I said, gee, we're really lucky we like each other, because we genuinely like each other. So it's been business as usual for us. But there are some people, some individuals, some couples that are just, their whole relationship has come apart. And maybe it was about time, because the other side of it is, if you're not happy in life, the next thing is death. So just get happy. We're running out of time. Let's go back to that debt stuff, because I'm really interested in that currently as a topic. What if someone owes you money and you can't afford your services? What would somebody do in reference to starting to look at finding a way to collect those funds?
Sure. So the first thing that people need to be aware of is that there have been changes federally in relation to insolvency. So it means that companies can at the moment trade insolvently, and that the quick things like issuing a statutory demand under the Corporations Act, the timeframes have been pushed out a long way. So pushing a company to the point of wind up is very difficult at the moment. So most disputes, it depends on the amount of money you're talking about recovering. So if you're talking recovering, say, $5,000, your best bet is probably to go into the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. It's relatively straightforward. You lodge your complaint online, you pay a fee, and then it will go through a process of mediation and then a final hearing if necessary, and you can get an order for that person to pay you money, assuming that you're successful. And the good thing about VCAT is, generally speaking, they won't allow lawyers to appear on small claims like this. So it is just the individuals involved. Therefore, you're not incurring legal fees.
VCAT. Isn't that great that VCAT do that for you?
Yes, it's fantastic. And the lodging fees are not high. It depends on the amount of the claim, but it's not the same as the state court system. It's quite low.
Up to what amount?
Usually I would say 40,000. When you're starting to get to the $40,000 mark, then you're into the magistrate's court system. So if you're going to the magistrate's court, you can go up to 100,000. And if you want to claim more than 100,000, then you need to go to the next level up, which is the county court or the Supreme Court. And things certainly get more expensive from, if you choose not to go to VCAT, if you choose to go to the magistrate's court, more expensive. County court is more expensive than that. Supreme Court is, generally speaking, the most expensive, particularly in relation to filing fees.
Yeah, you'd have to really, it's great that VCAT do up to 40,000, but if you're going to chase 100 grand, you're going to need, how much would you need? Like if you ended up in county court, what would you need for lawyers' fees? That would be an expensive exercise, wouldn't it?
It is. Look, it depends on the lawyer and the complexity of the claim. You could be looking anywhere sort of from the 15,000 right up to, hundreds of thousands of dollars if you've got a very complicated claim. I think it would be rare that you would have your hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you win your case, you can ask the court for a costs order.
We like those, don't we?
Yes,
we like
we
cost
do.
orders.
To have the debtor pay a portion of your costs. So the court may say to them, yes, that order, yes, you can have a costs order, but just bear in mind that cost order are a bit like going to see a specialist. The court will order essentially the Medicare rebate, and then the gap, you'll never get that back. So what you need to do when you're looking at any sort of court action is look at how much are you trying to claim, what the costs associated are going to be, what we call litigation fatigue. Are you going to get 6 months into this and say, I'd never wish I'd started.
Do you get a lot of that? Do you get people that come in hard and then by 6 months are like, oh, I'm over this, forget it?
Absolutely.
That must be
Most
frustrating
matters.
for you. Do you get frustrated by that? You must, all that hard work to get something ready to just go and then the client pulls out.
It is frustrating, but people, I think, as a society, as a community, we underestimate how stressful litigation can be. It's the biggest thing happening in your life at the time, and it's a slow process. In certain types of cases, it may be a year or more before you get to court. And your life is revolving around that. So
it's big dollars
it's a
too,
big
isn't
decision.
it?
It is. It's a big decision. And if you're going to look at it, you also need to look at, okay, if I'm going to sue ABC Proprietary Limited because they didn't pay my bill, at the end of the day, does ABC Proprietary Limited actually own anything? Because if it doesn't, then what's the point?
Oh, that's so good. Do you do that initially? Do you go and search to
Mhm.
ensure that they have assets before you recommend that the client takes them on?
Yes. Yeah. If the entity you're suing has property, then we're fairly happy to proceed. But a lot of these companies, especially in COVID, they don't have anything. So you could spend your money going ahead with this sort of action and not see anything. And a lot of people will say, it's the principal. I want to grind them into the
Stuff the
ground
principal.
as a matter of principle, but principles are expensive. So very expensive.
So expensive. Yeah, so they've really got to have something worth chasing. What about
Yes.
mediation? Do you recommend mediation before? And is that something that your firm will help with?
So mediation is a part of any court process, whether it's VCAT, magistrates, Supreme Court. So all court processes involve a compulsory mediation at some point before you go
good,
to trial.
isn't it? That's really
It is good. And I would say that somewhere between 90 and 95% of cases do not go beyond mediation. Very few actually get to a trial. The majority settle at mediation. So there is a benefit in, I think, doing mediation. You get both people in the same sort of arena and you get very real about what you can recover. So it's good, but the best defense to this sort of thing is to have great terms and conditions. And if you're dealing with a company, to have a director personally guarantee the debts of the company.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because isn't that actually been written in now? So if you are taking credit from someone, isn't that part of their terms and conditions that they can take you personally?
It's not in everybody's terms and conditions because terms and conditions aren't just generic across the board. So it's whatever you have in your terms and conditions, that's the contract. And if you don't have a terms and conditions that includes a director's guarantee, the directors are not personally liable for the debts of the company. There is that corporate veil there.
So are more of your clients now asking for that to be included in their terms and conditions?
Yes.
Are you recommending that they do that in this climate?
Yes, we've always recommended it, but we are seeing more of that type of work come through because when you have a director's guarantee, and I recently had this, that a client for a long time has had it in their terms and conditions and had a separate director's guarantee under which they could caveat the director's property and the debtor company owed $10,000 or so. So my client contacted me and said, I want to put a caveat on the property. And I said, great, it's in your terms and conditions of your guarantee, because if it's not in your terms and conditions, you can't just caveat somebody's property because they owe you money. That's not
I can't imagine
a
that
valid ground of claim.
be caveats all over Melbourne if that was the case.
Exactly.
Everybody would own everybody else's stuff.
Exactly. So this client had the appropriate terms and conditions. We lodged the caveat. The Land Titles Office automatically notifies the property holder that a caveat has been lodged. property owner gets in touch with my client and says, what the hell? And my client says, well, you haven't paid me.
I'm glad you made this so PG. They said, what the hell? The guy said, what the hey?
And we managed to get payment out of him within a week because he did
how
not
funny.
want that
Really?
caveat.
Did you?
Beforehand, he did not have those funds. Kept, I'll pay you next week, I'll pay you next week, avoiding calls. But the moment we slapped caveat on there, he came to play.
He kind of straightened him up and he flew right, didn't he?
It did. And it's probably because he owned the property jointly with his wife, and his wife probably got the notice and went, what the hell? Who's putting a caveat on our property? Haven't you paid that bill yet?
Pay it. That's good. I'm glad that people are doing that, because you know, the other side of it too is, if you're, so I've got some paperwork, and it basically says, if you don't pay me, I'll take your house, your car, your kidneys, and your first child. And if people don't want to sign that paperwork for me, I don't want to work with them. Right? The people that I say, and I tell them straight up, this is what you're signing. Everyone that signs it, I know they're never going to do me. They just wouldn't. One of the guys, I said to one of the guys, a client, and I said, you're really quick to sign that knowing what my clauses are. And he said, yeah, but Liz, we would always pay our agents. We just do. We always pay them. So we're not going to not behave that way just because you've got something in here that's nefarious. We're always going to pay. So that's interesting. It's interesting that that's what you're seeing right now. So get your terms and conditions looked at. What could business proprietors be thinking about now as well, other than their terms and conditions?
Receiving payments up front, or a portion, a deposit. Certainly we're seeing that across a lot of legal practices. Lawyers saying, well, I want to be paid upfront for that work. And we are getting feedback that a lot of clients are not happy with that across the board. But it does beg the question that if you're not happy to pay upfront or pay a deposit upfront, why is that? Are you going to be a problem later to collect that debt from? So a lot of that is happening. But yeah, mainly the personal guarantees, because people want to keep the work coming in to generate that income in COVID. And it's quite easy to say to a client, these are our terms and conditions. We're not going to put a caveat on your house unless you don't pay your bill. It's just sitting there in the background. We don't put it on until it's needed. But at least they've got that option. And we can put different types of securities over companies, over specific assets, such as, what have I got at the moment? Excavators, vehicles, motor vehicles, aircraft, those sorts of things.
Please don't take my plane, Melanie. Please don't take my plane. Over your plane. Okay, well, that sounds interesting. So so has your business grown during COVID? Have you stayed steady with your client base?
Unfortunately not. We have had a reduction in work, in income. I think that's partially attributable to not being in an office, so you don't have that street presence.
Frontage, yeah.
You don't have the ability to have clients come into your office for consultations or signing of documents. So that makes things quite difficult. Things like wills, consultations with people who don't have access to Zoom, things like that. And I think it's also a reflection that most people don't have the money at the moment to pay legal fees. You know, we're not high on the list unless something's urgent. So we're hoping to see a bounce back in our industry soon, but who knows?
Is that the entire legal? Is that the entire legal fraternity, do you think? So all lawyers have been affected like that?
I think a lot of lawyers, I would say the majority of lawyers that I've spoken to have been affected. And the majority of businesses I've spoken to have also been affected, some worse than others. Some industries have been really hard hit, like the massage services industry, the cafes, obviously. Some not so much if they were doing online sales or they were working remotely anyway. But it is across the board. I think businesses are suffering.
It's really interesting, isn't it? We've been, because of the builder's bonus. Yeah, that's your favourite one. We've been really, really busy, like busy, 30, 40 new client meetings a week. But that's not evident in every industry. Not every industry has had that awakening. I'm wondering if the government need to do more to stimulate the economy other than what they're doing. It kind of feels like it's not. Is it the trickle-down economy? Like the trickle-down economy is meant to help everybody. Everybody kind of gets elevated because of the trickle-down economy. But that's not happening in your sector and other sectors. So it kind of feels like there's something missing. It hasn't quite gelled.
Yeah,
Although
our sector is feeling that we are in a bit of a difficult position because so many things have been opened, like retail, like hospitality, the construction industry to a certain level, and people have started going back to normal. They don't realise that there are still industries that are not permitted to operate their businesses. They think that, it's back to normal. So people are often quite shocked when we say, no, we can't do that in our office. We're still under restrictions. So I think the first thing to do would certainly be to open up the economy and let everybody back to work. Because what a lot of people don't realise is that, like you've said, the trickle-down economy is that if you can't get back in and you can't work and your income's still down, well, it doesn't matter that the cinemas are open. You're not going to buy tickets to the cinema. Charitable organisations are really missing out at the moment because the donations they would have received from businesses are not coming through. The businesses can't afford it. The things like the school fete, those things in the community are really feeling that stretch because of the trickle-down economy. And a lot of those won't be evident for another 6 months or more, but when they do hit, it's going to be pretty awful.
So support local. If you're, I had a business owner on last week. Support local, get out to your local community, listen. And if you need a will done and you want to have fun doing it, please go to South East Lawyers. Because let me tell you something, Melanie Heffernan, she's a machine. Hey mate, thanks for joining me. We're going to talk about suing developers next week. I'm going to put that on the agenda because we've got an interesting little thing happening my end and we'll go through it. Won't mention any names right now because I do love a good surprise. Thank you for joining me, mate. Always amazing to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, we're suing developers next week. Beautiful. Thank you for joining, for all of you that make our show possible, that put everything to air at Joy, and for my wonderful editor and my great friend Carolyn, who does everything for me from South Australia. We're thinking about you, sweetheart. And if you have any questions for any of our guests, please reach out to Got Money. Take care, everyone. Have a great week.